I have played the Shado Pan Windwalker Monk and the Conduit of the Celestials and the actual rework of the Monk, which is to this day the biggest class rework that I have seen outside of them actually revamping the talents coming into Dragonflight. It changes so much for Windwalkers and actually makes the hero talents kind of pale into comparison. Why though? Let's check it out first. There are too many things change for Windwalker to approach in one video, and it would be wonderful to talk about each and every one of them, which we did on our stream. However, since it is alpha and likely a lot of this will be changed by the time the game launches, I don't think it's that big of a deal to talk about each one individually, so I will focus on some of the more interesting ones and some of the ones that will impact you the most. Part of the Monk rework that the devs have stated in their blue post is that they want to focus on secondary stats a little bit more, since we have known that Windwalker monks have suffered from a lack of scaling, as some people would like to call it, where you just pretty much play crit versatility for the third or fourth expansion in a row, and that just ends up getting boring. So what they want to do is focus on haste and mastery as secondary stats. Although they didn't talk too much about mastery, and they say that they just want to use that as a tuning knob, so at least we know that they will probably buff mastery if it ends up to be too weak as a secondary stat. For haste, they have changed a bunch of stuff. One thing that you might be interested to know is that Fists of Fury now scales with haste and have its damage go up the more haste you have, which is great because Fists of Fury still takes a long time to channel, especially when you have so many things that you want to do right now as a Windwalker monk. The channel is a little bit long, so haste will make it way better. And Glory of the Dawn is part of the haste changing mechanic, where now your Rising Sun kick has a chance equal to 100% of your haste to trigger a second time, dealing physical damage and restoring 1 chi. And because they want to encourage haste even more, they are increasing the cost of energy for Tiger Palm. I think it's 60 energy as of recording this video. That might change, to really incentivize you wanting haste to increase energy regeneration. Now, that is a little bit of a weird thing because we know that haste usually increased energy regeneration, and this has been a topic of discussion with Rogue as a class as well, and I haven't heard any rogues wanting haste for that particular reason. It didn't really work in designing Rogue, where you want to manage your energy better and using haste as a solution for that, so I'm not sure if it will work for Windwalker, but at least haste will be better, which is something that we probably wouldn't have said in the last couple of years. Another thing that you will notice being gone is Touch of Death, and not the actual ability, but the way it plays in Dragonflight, where it can go AoE, where you can recast it and things like that. That was very hard to balance, considering that it was part of the AoE kit, and it not being an AoE identity of Windwalkers anymore leaves the devs a lot of room to be able to tune the actual AoE of Windwalker a little bit better. So now, as far as Touch of Death is concerned, in your spec tree as Windwalker, you only have Meridian strikes, and now it makes it so that when you combo strike, the cooldown of Touch of Death is reduced by 0.35 seconds, and Touch of Death deals an additional 15% damage. That's great. While on the class tree, you have improved Touch of Death, which makes the ability now be used on targets with less than 15% health remaining as opposed to 10, and dealing 35% of your maximum health in damage. And actually, to round it up completely, you have the Touch of Death Capstone Fatal Touch. Touch of Death increases your damage by 5% for 30 seconds after being cast, and its cooldown is reduced by 90 seconds. This is everything that you're going to be getting in Touch of Death, and the final functionality of it is supposed to be a big execute ability. Does quite a bit of damage on alpha, which is great because executes are always fun. And since we're now on the capstones, you will notice a lot of things have changed in the bottom part of the talent tree. All of the capstones except Fatal Touch are more or less utility, survivability, or mobility orientated, so you have less throughput in your capstone. And there are a lot of new talents, but the interesting ones that you will find really cool start with Lighter Than Air at the bottom left side of the tree. Roll causes you to become lighter than air, allowing you to double jump to dash forward a short distance once within 5 seconds. That is cool, dude. You essentially roll, and if you jump, you normally jump, but if you press jump a second time while you are in air, you'll just dash forward, kind of how Havoc can Fell Rush mid-air. This is of course great for mobility. You don't really need it, but it's a cool thing to get, and you don't really have a lot of points to spend through, because from what I was able to observe, a lot of throughput has been taken away from the general class talent tree. And lighter than air is not the only thing that's cool. You also have a more controversial one, which is rushing reflexes as a choice node with Clash. I have never played Clash. I have never seen anybody play Clash in any relevant endgame content, so I'm not sure if you will ever play it, but it is an option. And now you can also go with rushing reflexes, and this makes your heightened reflexes allow you to react swiftly to the presence of enemies, causing you to quickly lunge to the nearest enemy in front of you within 10 yards after you roll. What does that mean? That means that if you have a target selected, ideally, but I think it might work without a target selected as well, you roll towards your target, and if that target is not exactly at the point of where your roll ends and it's within 10 yards, you will actually blink towards that target, actually facing it so that you can continue doing your rotation. This is a neat quality of life to kind of save all of those bugs that roll weirdly or roll too far or roll not far enough to get back into target. It's only 10 yards, so it's not a big deal, but it is very obvious when it happens, and it is really cool. One important thing to talk about, even though I'm not going to go into all of the talents, is that the bloat that monks have is going to be addressed, something that usually affects Brewmaster a little bit more, but we are on the Windwalker chapter, so two cool things that happen is that Chi Wave now and Expel Harm are passives. Chi Wave essentially is passive through the actual choice node. You can get either Chi Burst or Chi Wave, but Chi Wave, if you do select it, is every 15 seconds your next Rising Sun kick or Vivified releases a wave of Chi energy, which was basically the Chi Wave. And for Expel Harm in your class tree, if you talent into Fist of Fury, right below it is Combat Wisdom. Every 15 seconds your next Tiger Palm also casts Expel Harm and deals 100% additional damage. This is great that you have fewer buttons to bloat your bars. However, as far as Windwalker is played, you usually use Expel Harm to generate an additional Chi. Now that's outside of your control, which is not that great. I don't know if you're going to feel it too much, but not having control over your Chi generation is something obvious if you have played with it before. And lastly, rushing Jade Wind has made its way as a passive, similar to Expel Harm and Chi Wave, into Windlord, and we will get to that in a second, because now we're looking at the spec tree for Windwalker, and you can tell a lot of the stuff is changed and moved around, and you might not recognize what this talent is looking like. But one thing to address is that Bone Dust Brew is gone. I'm fine with that. I didn't really care too much for it for Windwalker or Mistweaver ever since Shadowlands, and the fact that it's gone now from the tree is amazing. And now we have to talk about some of the key points in this talent tree, since they will be relevant for the hero talents. First of all, Windlord has been moved around and now is kind of similar, but right beneath it you have Rushing Jade Wind, making that Strike of the Windlord applies Mark of the Crane to all enemies and summons a Whirling Tornado around you that deals damage. So that kind of way of addressing bloat is perfect as far as I'm concerned. You also have Thunder Fist as an additional empowerment for Windlord. Strike of the Windlord grants you 4 stacks of Thunder Fist and an additional stack for each enemy struck. Thunder Fist discharges upon melee strikes, dealing a lot of nature damage. Further doubling down on Windlord, you have Gale Force. Targets struck by Strike of the Windlord are sent reeling from its impact, causing them to become vulnerable to your attacks for 10 seconds. Your abilities have a 100% chance to affect the targets a second time at 10% effectiveness as nature damage while they are vulnerable. This reminds me a little bit of Bone Dust Brew, and it's one way to kind of incorporate the mechanic of doing damage and then that damage kind of echoing into your enemies. And last but not least, Communion with Wind. Strike of the Windlord's cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds and his damage is increased by 20% if you so decide to go heavy into the Strike of the Windlord damage. Whether or not that becomes viable, good, or part of your build remains to be seen, because there might be some issues with the hero talents, and we will get to that in a second. Feline Stomp has also been addressed with blue posts that said exactly what people were hating about it, and the fact that the reset effect was really hard to get to, and sometimes the ground effect would bug out on certain bosses. I know people were having hard time with Volcross with Feline Stomp, and now that is gone. And you won't have to stay in the lines anymore because you have a new capstone called Jade Fire Harmony, making enemies and allies hit by Jade Fire Stomp to be affected by Jade Fire Brand, increasing your damage and healing against them by 12% for 10 seconds respectively, depending if they are an enemy or an ally. That means that your Jade Fire Stomp essentially moves with you or moves with your targets instead of just being on the ground and forcing you to be there or forcing people to be there. Plus, there are two other capstones for Jade Fire Stomp that actually make it really cool. Path of Jade increases the initial damage of Jade Fire Stomp by 10% per target hit, by that damage up to a maximum of 50% additional damage, so it kind of stops killing after 5 targets. And the more important one, Singularity Focused Jade makes Jade Fire Stomp initial hit now strike only one target, but it deals 500% of the damage and healing, which is great because it has applications for raiding when you only have one boss and the AoE damage doesn't really make sense. This is part of the Monk rework, and kind of to go hand in hand, we have to look at Whirling Dragon Punch, which is also now kind of like a capstone. It still does what you think it does, but it comes with two capstones that are choice nodes. Revolving Whirl makes Whirling Dragon Punch have a 100% chance to activate Dance of Chi-Ji. First of all, Dance of Chi-Ji has been a really cool thing to play with. When you get the proc, you deal a lot of damage. The problem with it was a lot of the time it was very RNG, and when you got Dance of Chi-Ji and when you didn't got Dance of Chi-Ji are two separate situations that were very obvious on the DPS meter. Never really felt good. Now there's an interesting feedback and gameplay loop where you press your Dragon Punch and you instantly do a spinning crane kick that's beefed up by Dance of Chi-Ji, provided you had your mark set up beforehand. That sounds great, doesn't it? Well, wait until you read the other one, which is part of what makes Windwalker a beast and maybe a potential main. Knowledge of the Broken Temple, aptly named because this is broken. Whirling Dragon Punch grants 4 stacks of Teachings of the Monastery and its damage is increased by 20%. Teachings of the Monastery can now stack up to 8 times. What is Teachings of the Monastery, you might say? I've never played Mistweaver before, so I don't know this talent and I've maybe never played with it ever. Teachings of the Monastery is a talent that you have access to early on in the tree, and it makes your Tiger Palm cause your next blackout kick to strike an additional time. Normally this can stack up to 4 times, but with the capstone that we just read, it will go all the way to 8 times. Blackout kick has a 12% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Rising Sun kick. What this means is that once you have a couple of stacks of Teachings of the Monastery and your Whirling Dragon Punch, you'll naturally get to 8 stacks of Teachings of the Monastery, meaning that once you blackout kick, you hit 8 times for extra damage, most likely instantly resetting your Sun Kick's cooldown. That is incredibly fun when your screen just fills with numbers. And hey, that's not it. You also have Shadow Boxing Treads. Blackout kick, damage increased by 10%, great, and strikes an additional 2 targets, meaning that you will cleave all of these extra attacks onto a total of 3 targets. Did I hear 24 kicks in 1 second? Is my foot a machine gun? Yes, it is. And yours can be too if you do decide to play Windwalker or support the content on our Patreon, because our Patreons are making all of this possible. No, really, YouTube revenue has always been a little bit of a hit and miss, and although we are grateful for it, it's hard to rely on it. However, the grace of the Patreons making this possible is reliable, and it has helped us make a lot of changes and upgrades to our office. If you like our content and you want to see more of this in the future and support us in the process, consider checking the Patreon link down below. Not only will you be doing all of that cool stuff, you'll also have access to custom-made 4K wallpapers with your specific character tune on it, bloopers. that's what I just did. That's part of it. And of course, occasional Patreon monthly podcasts where we talk about all things Marcelian Online and what the plan is for the future, what goes behind the scenes and things like that. That's a little bit unscripted, uncut, unfiltered, and a little bit dirty. Just like how every monk's foot is going to be in War Within, dirty with the blood of the enemies because you strike 24 times in AoE. What? That is fantastic. I have to say that playing through Windwalker has been a blast on the alpha, and that's just been the first day. I cannot wait to see where the spec is being taken into the future. Also, Serenity is gone. Bye, Serenity. Nobody ever loved you. Let's go into the hero talents, and we will touch Shado Pan first because it is the cooler sounding one, the one we know of, because Shado Pan is what is it, a faction, an organization back in Mists of Pandaria actually existing in a game, and Taranzu is unironically cool as fuck. Shado Pan is not. After all the praises I gave Windwalker, I do have to say that Shado Pan overall has been a little bit disappointing as far as playstyles are concerned, because it's most likely passive, and to be fair, it doesn't really scream Shado Pan to me. I don't know what should scream Shado Pan, but this is not it. The initial ability is Flurry Strikes. Dealing damage equal to 10% of your max health, which you're gonna be doing a lot, generates a Flurry Charge. For each 400 energy you spend, you'll be spending a lot. Unleash all Flurry Charges, dealing a lot of damage per charge. And that's mostly what the talent does. It affects Flurry Strikes in different way, and it's a lot of passive things. Like a good example of how to wrap your head around the hero talent is the capstone, which is Wisdom of the Wall. Every 10 Flurry Strikes become infused with the Wisdom of the Wall for 20 seconds. What does Wisdom of the Wall do? Well, it makes your critical strike damage increase by 30%, which is pretty good. Effect of your mastery increase by 25%. Dodge and crit strike chance increased by 25% of your versatility bonus, which is a weird way to not make us get versatility again. And Flurry Strikes deals a lot of damage converted into shadow to all uncontrolled enemies within 6 yards. Now, I don't know what uncontrolled means. Does that mean targets that are not stunned, slowed, rooted? That's probably not here and there, but we'll see how that plays out mechanically into the future. I'm not saying that Shado Pan is not good. It does a lot of damage. Jesus. Wisdom of the Wall is such a fat amplifier, and I have seen some numbers on my screen that I thought I wouldn't see since Legion, in the millions. So it's not necessarily surprising that you're doing a lot of damage, but once again, all of this just happens behind the scenes, and there's not a lot of things that you do. Most likely, none of the hero talents will impact how you play. Maybe that's good, because to be honest, on its own, Windwalker is just turbo fun. It's just a little bit sad that the hero talent for Shado Pan doesn't really feel heroic. And a similar hero talent with what we've seen for Red, Veteran's Eye makes striking the same target 5 times within 2 seconds grant 1% haste. Multiple instances of this effect may overlap, stacking up to 10 times, all the way to most likely 10% haste. This is clearly for raiding and clearing bosses. That's great. That will definitely help Windwalker deal with single target scenarios, although I don't know if that's still an issue as of now. But it is a way to put haste back onto the menu, and the rest of it, I mean, you can check it for yourself. It's not very inspiring. I wish I could say differently for Conduit of the Celestials, because it's still mostly passive, although it does feel like it interacts with the kit a little bit more. I do have to also say that Conduit of the Celestials made me realize that I don't know what is going on behind the scenes with Monk. Stuff is happening, things are dying, which is great. Am I the reason for it? Is it the Celestials, or what is going on? But at least you get a new ability called Celestial Conduit, where it makes you channel for a little while and deal incredible damage around you, and you can move while you're channeling, which is great. Once again, we have channeled abilities as melee classes, something that melees don't really ask for, but hey, that is really cool, and I can imagine this is, you know, in part in theme with what Mistweaver is supposed to be doing. And unfortunately, similar to the Shado Pan, the entire tree does not really seem to change anything that you do. And it might also force you into specific talents, which could cause some problems. Some of the talents that you will most likely be taking are Invoke Zuen, because that is a big part of what the Conduit of the Celestial is supposed to be doing. You are the Conduit of the Celestials, and the Celestial that Windwalker has access to is Zuen, although you will have access to all three through different effects, where you call out each one with, I think Tiger Palm calls out New Zao every now and again, Spinning Crane Kick calls out Chi Ji, although the Flight of the Red Crane has been bugged on alpha when I tested it, so whenever this procced and Chi-Ji came in to like chew my enemies apart, it broke the channel of my spinning crane kick. Most likely not intended, so some of these interactions can also be a little bit buggy, which is fine, it is alpha, but probably work towards not letting me kind of realize what was going on. A little bit too passive. August Dynasty is another talent that will force you into Jade Fire Stomp because makes it so that when you cast Jade Fire Stomp, it increases the damage of your next Rising Sun kick by 30%. And this effect can only be active once every 8 seconds. I'm not sure if that's something specific for Mistweaver. I haven't checked Mistweaver yet, but you cannot cast Jade Fire Stomp more than 8 seconds for Windwalker because there are no more resets. So maybe that has been lost in the tooltip. Maybe there's something that I missed. Either way, you will want to get Jade Fire Stomp if August Dynasty is something that you want to play with or something that mathematically is simming higher than its counterpart. Heart of the Jade Serpent is also a problematic talent because consuming 30 chi causes Yulon to decrease the cooldown time of Rising Sun Kick, Fists of Fury, Strike of the Windlord, Whirling Dragon Punch by 100% for 8 seconds. Now, once again, this kind of sounds like you will want to have all of those talents because we also have to think a little bit from the new player's perspective. When a new player sees this, they're gonna think, oh, well, I obviously want Strike of the Windlord and Whirling Dragon Punch, and the other talent makes you want Jade Fire Stomp as well. And to be fair, if you are playing Conduit of the Celestials, are you not supposed to be taking all of the middle bottom talents related to Zuen, the Celestial that works with Conduit of the Celestials? I don't think you'll have enough points to get all of them, and two things will happen. Either you will just have dead talents, or you'll have to ignore tooltips of your hero talents. Maybe Whirling Dragon Punch is just something that you're never going to be picked because mathematically it's better not to. That is not intuitive. That is something that only if you read an online guide or watch a guide video on YouTube is something that you will know, and that's a problem. And it kind of makes the rework for Windwalker a little bit bad, considering that both of these talent trees will probably restrict a lot of the talents and create issues where a lot of the other talents might become dead because they don't just synergize well enough with the hero talents. This is indeed a problem of the hero talents and something that they're most likely aware of going forward. And it all revolves around, in terms of building your Windwalker 2, everything is AoE now. You have Spinning Crane Kick, Fists of Fury, Strike of the Windlord, Jade Fire Stomp, Whirling Dragon Punch, Blackout Kicks, all ways of doing AoE, and you don't have enough points to get them all, which again makes it a little bit counterintuitive to build your Windwalker without actual external assistance. Not something ideal for a rework. It is cool, and hey, if they're all decently balanced and I want to go for a full Spinning Crane Kick build or a full Strike of the Windlord build, I can have competitive damage between the two. Hopefully that is the case because, once again, this is alpha and we don't really know. But there are potentially dead talents that seem to either not function properly, maybe they haven't been addressed or tuned yet, but stuff like Touch of the Tiger, increasing Tiger Palm damage by 25%. This does not matter until they buff the baseline damage of Tiger Palm. Tiger Palm does nothing. 25% of nothing is still nothing. Part of that is also Jade Ignition, which has been a legendary since Shadowlands that nobody really played with. This has been a talent for Windwalker that, if it escaped my gaze, I haven't seen anybody play with it. And also Martial Mixture is a talent that makes, once again, Tiger Palm deal more damage. Even if you get to the 12 stacks of Martial Mixture without ever casting Tiger Palm, which is not going to happen because you don't have enough chi generating abilities, this is still bad. This barely makes Tiger Palm do as much damage as one Blackout Kick, and supposedly you're getting all of those stacks, probably from teachings of the monastery. So maybe this was intended to be kind of like a weave in between the two abilities, which is something that I would be 100% behind because I've always liked this kind of gameplay. The damage is just not there to take this point because you have so many other nodes that you don't have enough points for, so why would you put it here? That is a problem. And all of this makes building your Windwalker a little bit difficult if you've never played the Windwalker before or you're not using an external source. And although playing Windwalker is so good, dude, and this is probably not even the final version of it, a new player is going to have a lot of troubles trying to figure out exactly where they need to go and what they need to pick, because there are just so many options that all seem to be solving similar problems. One thing to notice is that with all of these nodes, especially in the class tree, that I think it's the class right now with the most amount of talent nodes, I think I've counted them, they're 48. This just makes it overwhelming to look at, but secretly, maybe I'm lying. Secretly, maybe this is the best talent tree ever, because there are very few nodes that you require more than 1 point to spend in, giving you actually a lot of options, and the majority of the options are all utility, survivability, or mobility. In terms of actual throughput, there are very few nodes giving you a lot of flexibility in building your monk with however many stuns you want, roots, incaps, damage reduction, healing, whatever you want. There are so many of them that this is actually unironically fun to play with and actually build your class. I legit unironically think that the monk class talent tree might be the best or the ideal talent design for WoW classes, and I hope that other classes do it like this. Have very little, close to no, ideally, throughput through the class tree, and just make me choose my identity and build my own monk personality based on these talents. Because if you don't do this, you will have to build your ret in an ideal way, either playing Templar or Herald of the Sun or the new rework, because ret has been addressed as well, and we've covered it in our video that you need to check right now.